Welcome to The Lumber Word, where industry veterans Matt Beamer, Greg Riley, and Ashley Buckholt dissect the world of commodity lumber each week. We bring you up-to-date insights on supply, demand, and market trends, sharing our trading expertise to benefit everyone in the supply chain. Join us for informative and entertaining discussions that guarantee to make you wiser about all things lumber.
Hey everybody, welcome to this week's podcast of The Lumber Word. We are recording it on the 22nd of January, 2025. Sig Thoma is returning guest. Before I reintroduce Sig, Greg, you said you had a story.
Well, we were just chatting, and we're waiting for Charles to come on, and I hope he comes on because he always adds a lot of really valuable insight into like life in general and Southern Yellow Pine specifically. But we're saying that, hey, being on time is how important it is, but in how people respond. And, the story about Larry Bird when he was coach of the Indiana Pacers. And, he said that, hey, if you're not on the plane at 10 o'clock, it's wheels up. We'll leave you behind. You find your way you need to go. And like guys were like sauntering out there and the plane took off and they're like, what? You didn't wait for me? I mean, it was like, starters too, stars. So they had to figure out how they got to wherever they got to. Nobody ever was late for the plane ever again after that. Didn't have to worry about it. So
I was watching basketball, something relative to that. The Bulls deal again. Was that from
The Last Dance?
Yeah, where
probably
Robin,
one of the greatest sports shows there ever is. Absolutely.
Robin said he needed 48 hours. And the coach said, you want 48 hours? He goes, shit, if you're only going to give me 48 hours, I'll take it. And Jordan was like, if anybody needs a break, it's me. But so he goes out to Vegas and they had to go retrieve him.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Who, Rodman or Jordan?
Rodman.
Rodman, yeah.
But I guess Phil thought that was what was his coaching style. Each person was an individual and he'd give him a break. And Jordan was like, we'll never get him back if you send him there.
That's funny.
He was like all like Zen, the Zen coach, and I kind of feel that way. That I'm like that with you, Ashley, kind of like a Zen coach.
Yeah, it's like so had a little. So Sig, I wanted to introduce Sig today. I think Sig, you want to give a little bit of 101 of your bio?
Yeah, I started back in the 80s, early 80s, during the 16% interest rate scenario. And traded lumber for 8 years, and then went to New York as a fund manager for 3 years, and then came back, went to work for Louisiana Pacific for 9 years, and then went out on my own as a distribution, wholesale, and import company. And anyway, that was pretty much it. I'm on the board of directors at Doman Lumber in Doman Building Materials, to be exact, up in Canada, Vancouver, BC, and I've been with them since the original IPO back in 2004. So that's basically it, roughly.
You must have seen some stuff in your LP days too. That was when they were really blowing and going.
You know how you have claims sometimes in lumber for bad lumber? How about a $3 billion claim with a B?
Can you just take
the siding claim?
So how do you start trying to fix that one? Taking the person to dinner first, or how does that start out?
Yeah, take all the builders to Vegas.
With Rodman.
Yeah, right. So that was it.
Well, very, very cool. So yeah, I wanted to get started here, talk about stuff, but feeling like a rookie today. I had a couple orders canceled on me that were, I'd say they're getting a little long in the tooth on being late, but I'm a little salty from that yet today, but I guess I'll get over it.
No price adjustments?
Well, that was the thought at first, and that's what we said we were going to do. But when it started out, it got right into, I'm going to cancel these. I'm like, why? Like, it's still the same as the market price today. But maybe so I'm a little hurt about it.
You're competitive, right, Ash? Didn't you play college football?
Yeah.
I heard something a long time ago, and I think it's true. I heard that highly competitive people have really long memories.
Yeah, I'm not like that soccer show where I'm supposed to have a memory like what is that, like a goldfish?
Well, that's like kind of like I think about like Mark Andrews off season after dropping that pass for the 2-point to tie the game up. Yeah, he's going to be
I feel
thinking
bad
about
for
that.
the guy. He's on the verge of a Hall of Fame career, right? I mean, he's been a top 3 or 4 tight end in the league for
I had
7
No,
or 8
it's
years.
like it was very uncharacteristic. Yeah.
Dude, I had that happen to me in a high school football game. I was the guy that dropped it. It was drawn up where I'm a tight end. I go around the corner and I go back in the end zone and sneak back there. I was standing
Did it
by
hit you
my-
right? Did it hit you right in your hands?
perfectly as the clock dropped down from 2 to 1, 0, and I saw it coming, and I'm like, oh, this is so easy. And it hit my I think it was sophomore year though, or freshman year. And it hit my chest, and I remember it in slow motion just bouncing, and I was trying to go back and get it, and I couldn't get it. And when you watch the film, I was going to make an excuse that, yeah, it wasn't close. It was dead nuts center. The
Hit you
quarterback,
right on the numbers. Yeah.
yeah, like
yeah.
a 14-year-old quarterback threw just a freaking line at me. But so I don't feel I feel for people when that happens.
Yeah. Well, you like when you have your moment to be the star, you want to be the star, right?
Yeah, I think I was already celebrating being a star before I actually did the basic shit of catching the pass.
Because you were probably going to get like, the hot cheerleader after that. Yeah.
At age 14, yeah.
I would think it might have been freshman year. I wouldn't even known the difference. I may have been able to go get a Slurpee or something, right? A giant freaking Slurpee at 7-Eleven. Who knows? But so
hey, Ash, we got final housing starts for 2024 came out on Friday. And you want to run through the numbers? What do you think?
Yeah, because I mean, look, the calls this week have been from everybody like wondering what's going on in the market. Things are slowed down a little bit just because I think we've got basically snow in almost all 48 states, right? 48 states in the continental U.S. It's cold. Things slowed down a little bit. We're coming out of the holidays. One of the things you talked about the other day, Greg, was multifamily seemed to make a good rebound in 2024. So let's kick it off there and talk about it.
Yeah. So the final numbers. I mean, we had Dustin on last week, and we talked a little bit about this. Starts for the year ended up being down 3.9%, 1,364,000. Single family up 6.5, multifamily down 26.6. And if you recall, we started the year early in the first quarter where multifamily was down in the like 40 to 50% range. So it did make, I think that's a combination of, the comps getting better during the year and a little bit of an uptrend. I mean, it was a pretty big number for the month of December. And permits ended up being 1,471,000, single family up 6.5, multifamily down 18.8. So, I mean, I guess it's like, hey, no surprise. And the wild card is, hey, what do we expect for 2025? We've been talking, and we probably want to get a few more economists on to give us their view that multifamily will probably be up marginally from 24 to 25, given the adjustment back, and that, I mean, single family, it's hard to see that it could have any substantive change from where it's at. I mean, but this is probably the run rate that you're going to get. I mean, so like if I'm going to guess, I'm going to say, hey, at the end of the year, single family may be up a few percentage points, and multifamily maybe has a chance to be up a little bit more. Thoughts?
Yeah, that's good numbers, Greg. I'd like to chime in a little bit on the numbers on top of what you already covered there. We've had some real changes in the last 2 weeks, actually. Mortgage applications last week were up 33%. And this week they were almost unchanged. They were up like 0.1%. And I'm just seeing a big wave out there running a little bit harder towards home purchasing than we've seen in the past. That doesn't mean lumber is going to go up tomorrow. That's not my point. But I'm seeing a little bit of a wave out there that's pretty strong. And it's not 1 week's mortgage applications. We have plenty of inventory, and the builders are obviously cooperating. And I definitely see some stuff going on out there that I haven't seen, and I think it's because of the election. And everybody is no longer in limbo, who's going to get in, who's not going to get in. And it feels like there's a lot more confidence out there. To Greg's point
When
on
you got multifamily built, when you have the multifamily, I mean, the national builders all, having, depending on their market area, giving mortgages at 3.5%, 4.5%. They're going to keep that inventory moving, and the inventory of unsold homes is at a pretty decent level, and and home builder margins are at a decent level. So you're gonna. I think, like I say, I think single family is status quo. Status quo.
And to talk about home builders, there's some other excitement going on out there that maybe, I don't know if people noticed it or not, but Japanese interest rates are at 1%. Their prime rate is at 1.6%, and Japanese investment is coming in buying home builders. So the Japanese company called Sekisui bought MDC Home Builder for $4.9 billion, and that Japanese organization today is the 5th largest home builder in the United States as we sit here today.
Is 4 point something? Is that a lot of money? Is that a lot of money?
$4.9 billion? Yeah, it's a couple chapters.
Okay. I mean, not when you're talking about $500 billion for Stargate. It's not that much.
Right. But the unique thing is that what's cool about this, I think, that the Japanese interest rates are so low, so they can come over here and borrow at 1 or 2% at home, buy the home builder who makes 15 to 25% margin, depending on where he's at and what he's building, okay? And at the same time, they can give out mortgages again at 3.9, 4.9, or 2.9, because they can borrow at 1% at home.
The other thing that's great about that, Sig, is that the dollar is so strong that any earnings in US dollars translates to a lot of yen.
Oh, of course.
Well, that was gonna be my question from a borrowing standpoint. If you go from a yen to a US dollar, yen at 1% versus a US dollar at 2.9 or 3.9, how does that really impact? What kind of volume in dollars are they actually picking up with that?
To answer you, Charles, if you're a Japanese company, come to the United States and you buy the company, you convert your Japanese yen to US dollars because you got to pay 4.9 billion, right? So just for an example, you convert your Japanese to the 4.9 billion USD, and then you make profits and you decide most likely to park it in the United States in the bank and not take it back to Japan. Or maybe you decide you don't want to bank in the United States with all your profits and take it back to Japan, right? It's up to them. And they have to deal with the currency hedging and forward pricing of currencies and all that. But the point to me is that's really bullish is that we're going to have low interest rate home building done by a foreign country entity. That to me
hey, hot off the wire news here. I just saw a thing on the news flash that said Yakitori Industries has agreed to buy industrial forest products in South Carolina.
Whoa.
I don't care what that
4.6 billion? 4.6 billion? I mean,
I'll see y'all later. If that's the
case,
I'll see you later. Yeah.
Hey, Charles, just real quick, since I sent the email to the wrong Charles to start the show,
yes,
don't listen to the first. Don't listen to the first 5 minutes of the podcast because we lit you up.
Yeah, we lit you up, boy.
That's fine. I love criticism. I love criticism because if it wasn't from such a respectable group, I might take it personally. You know what I mean?
So housing, Sig, you said mortgage rates ticked up last week. We talked
mortgage applications.
Mortgage applications. Sig, we haven't asked you, what do you think these home builders are going to do with these hybrid mortgages? You and I have talked about it a couple times, driving home, chatting. Where do you think some of these home builders have some stuff to clear that they normally haven't, and how are they going to do it? What do they have coming in 2025? Yeah,
they will eventually, but you take a company like D.R. Horton has got $4 billion in cash, okay? So they can issue a lot of mortgage at sub borrowing capabilities and don't have to borrow that mortgage if they want to use some of their own capital or find somebody else that wants to come into the game at 4% long-term, 30% or 5%, 30 years, sorry, not 30%. So, there's all kinds of ways you can structure that. And in the meanwhile, it'll continue on. I'm not too concerned about it because if there was a concern, Wall Street would be pounding the builders saying, someday they're going to have a reckoning to come to with these mortgages, and they would be getting pounded, and they're not getting pounded.
It's not a big enough. It's not a big enough number. It's not a big enough number yet. They keep doing it for a couple of more years, then maybe it'll matter.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It could come to roost, but not at this time.
So looking at the market today, talking about things, watching what's going on, I think it's safe to say today, tomorrow, next week. Greg, what have you been saying about? I finally broke last week. Matt called me one time after work, said, "Dude, what do you think? Is there going to be a tariff?" And I'm
hold on. Matt
and I'm
calls
like,
you because he doesn't pick up my phone.
And I'm
calls.
like, he's like, do you think there's going to be a tariff? I'm like, yes, I do. Like, I finally gave up. I gave up.
The Canadian mill that called me or sent me an email. I go, what are you hearing about tariffs on your European imports? And he called. I said, hey, I just want to let you know, there is not going to be any tariff on Canadian lumber. There's not going to be any tariff on European lumber. There's not going to be any tariff. We've already renamed the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America.
Now you can drill in the Gulf of America, right?
We're like, I don't know if we've renamed Mount McKinley. I'm thinking that the Panama Canal is going to be real. I think that's.
But hold on, but per the speech though, McKinley made a lot of money for the United States on tariffs, though, Greg.
True that.
Well, the Department of Tariff Collection will be responsible for taking care of that.
Guys, in all serious,
I'm doubling down. There's going to be no tariffs. So
on the serious side, I really watch what the government does. In 2018 March, you can look it up. They brought in tariff and duties, whatever you want to call them today, and countervailing or not, doesn't matter. And I said to myself, lumber was at $325 on Western Spruce FOB mill. And I sat there and I said to myself, why are they bringing in a tariff at $325? And I talked to some friends back east. One of them works for the Fed Bank. And he said, well, it's real simple. Hey, Trudeau, you got 54 sawmills in the South. You're using my natural resources to make money. If I make you pay 21% duty, you can raise your price in the South by 21%, and we raise our price by 21%, and you and I are going to make a lot of taxes or dollars, whatever you want to call them. And I'm not saying that's the only reason why it went in, but the fact is afterwards, look what happened. We went to 1,700, not in March of 2018, but eventually. So the government spends a lot of time analyzing things, and when they do stuff in advance, way ahead, it's because something's coming, right? Usually. And I just use that case for future reference that it didn't go to 1,700 because we had a pandemic, yes. But also, look how much money that made the governments for that time period where we were sky high.
In the fast-paced world of North American softwood lumber, staying ahead is everything. At Fast Markets, we deliver cutting-edge analysis to keep you informed and prepared for the future. Introducing Fast Markets Lumber Commentary, your gateway to understanding market shifts and price developments. Our short-term outlook offers a comprehensive monthly overview packed with the latest trends and insightful analysis. From construction demand to housing supply side dynamics, we cover all the key indicators that matter to your business. Gain access to our renowned softwood lumber prices, including the industry-standard Random Lengths framing lumber composite price. Dive deep into essential market sectors like housing starts, repair and remodeling, and more with our expert analysis. But that's not all. Fast Markets Lumber Commentary gives you the tools to anticipate market changes with detailed insights into demand and supply drivers across the US, Canada, and even offshore trade, and what this ultimately means for the pricing outlook for softwood lumber. Plus, you get direct access to the analysts behind these invaluable forecasts. Ready to make informed strategic decisions? Visit fastmarkets.com/lumber-sample and get your sample of the outlook today. That's fastmarkets.com/lumber-sample to get a sample and find out more.
Yeah, I mean, the money's a rounding error, though, Sig. I mean,
Yes.
a couple of $1 billion, $10 billion is like nothing when we run a $2 trillion deficit. So, I mean, $5 or $10 billion, nothing. Meaningless in the big scheme of things. Meaningless.
Right. But Elon, here's 30 billion, go build electric cars, and then we're going to tell everybody we got global warming, and everybody's going to buy that electric car, and then we buy 300 million shares at $3, and then we sell it at $400. And you're going to get rich in the process.
I don't know.
No, so you're saying,
Sig,
you're saying follow
today
the
that
money?
looked like Vermont. I don't know anything. I don't know what you're talking about with this global warming thing. I mean, Charles.
Right. Well, yeah, it worked for the Tesla bias. It worked.
I mean, Charles, don't you love the white stuff down there, huh?
It's not bad. The kids love it, so they enjoyed it. I mean, it's a little
I loved. I
cold,
saw the picture
but,
I got the picture from Austin yesterday of like the snow down there, and I said, "Oh, geez, the kids probably canceled school." Oh no, they canceled it on Saturday for Tuesday.
Oh yeah, no,
You're not going to school all week
it's
down
pretty
there,
intense.
are you?
No, we're not. Melissa's real happy about it, to say the least.
And so, leading up to this talk of the tariff, the last 3 or 4 weeks, I think a lot of mills in Canada, for sure, held back on some stuff. Some shipped across to reloads that ship across to reloads. We got confirmation of that. I think from what I heard today, some of the mills, the bigger ones, have cars loading that they need to get pricing on and move. Somebody threw a number out how many cars they have to load and go. I'm like, well, shit, that's like a 2 or 3 day of production. It's not really that much. I mean, wood clears pretty quickly. I guess my question is, are we like perfectly in check right now, supply and demand?
I don't think so. I think Matt had a great comment last session where he said nobody has an order file. I think that tells you whether we're in balancing.
Some of that is on purpose, though, Sig, right? Some mills decided not to have an order file. And here I am. I'm a trader. First and foremost, I think like a trader. And when I hear that mills are making a conscious decision to not have an order file, my ears get perky. I pay attention. That to me is a sell signal and not a buy signal. And so Here we are a week later. There's no tariffs to speak of, and the mills have no order file, just like I figured. And so we're going to see a shaking out period where we have to reestablish what the price of lumber is to make certain lengths sell. The good news is we're going into a time of seasonal strength, and I think sharp money and sharp buyers have some numbers in mind, and there will be some trades done here in the next 2 weeks, and a lot of lumber will trade hands. That's my personal opinion, but they won't trade hands at printed prices from last Friday.
Matt, speaking of that Pacific Northwest, your big Canadian mills where you trade at, big, small, all the U.S. mills you trade with, what's the feeling in the last 24, 48 hours after everything's been absorbed?
Kind of like you when you got 2 orders canceled on you today. I mean, that's the feeling.
Yeah, you're right. I think you're right.
I mean, more people are distracted by what Trump's done in the last 72 hours. Monday was a holiday, and it might as well be a national. I don't know if you guys drove around town on Monday, but there was no traffic anywhere, and everybody was sitting there watching the boob tube.
Yeah.
So it might as well just been a national holiday. And then yesterday and today are they fine? I mean, we're doing some business. We're not getting skunked, but it's not like there's just tons of orders coming our way. And every other mill that I deal with in the West and the East is wanting me to, bid on things or at least talk to them. People are just sitting around kind of what's next. And generally speaking, when you see that type of behavior with bad weather and the futures board down $20-some in a week, then, I don't need to spell it out any more clearly than that. It's telling you, it's self-evident.
Yeah. Charles, on the Southern Pine side, had a little traction the last few weeks. Where are you at there with is it tough to tell with the weather and so forth? Like what's the feel on the pine side?
I mean, if anybody's buying anything, they need it yesterday. Anybody that has bought anything for 2 weeks from now wants it tomorrow, not 2 weeks from now. There's a sense of urgency on ownership, right? Obviously with pricing levels where they are. And I think Matt said it best as far as how it's setting up going into a seasonal strength scenario. I mean, we've had some treaters step in, but I mean, it hasn't been hot and heavy. And I mean, you look at the biggest concern I have is you look at the price of Central wood and then you look at the price of West Side wood. Obviously, East is always going to be the most expensive, but historically speaking, a lot of Central wood went to the West because there was a price discrepancy. Well, that doesn't exist anymore, at least currently, right? So you're in a scenario to where some of these Central mills are going to have to move wood East or West in order to create a liquidity event. And there's going to be an opportunity to buy, but I think it's going to be short-lived. I don't think it's going to crater the way everybody's expecting it to. I mean, some of these mills have done a good job cutting out production, and I think we're finally at a point to where log decks have cleared based on those previous production expectations, and lumber inventories have kind of eased a little bit, to be completely honest. And there's a little bit of a Russian standoff, and it's going to be who's gonna break first, and then who's gonna be the first one that has the audacity to put their name on something and make it work. I think time is everybody's friend, but time could also bite you in the butt. Like I said, I mean, everybody wants things tomorrow and yesterday. So it's a real interesting scenario. And then you compound that with the uncertainty with tariffs or presidential scenarios or political influences, and it creates a lot of disconnect, which creates a lot of opportunity.
What's a Russian standoff? I've heard of the other nationality one before, but
It's the European version.
Is that the European version?
It's usually over oil and gas and not lumber, but here we are.
Greg, Eastern mills you're talking to that were talking to somebody today. They told them yesterday they wanted to buy something. They said, you can buy it if you accept liability on if a tariff comes in, you're responsible for it. They said no, went and bought a car somewhere else. The mill called them back and said, why didn't you buy it from us? We would have done it without it. It's
really, silly and confusing. And then the challenge that I see is that we're going to go next week, and then it's going to be, hey, we're making progress on talks, but if things don't work out, we're going to put a tariff on February 15th. Hey, and this is going to drag on and
push the ball down the hill.
And so, to Matt's point, two things I think, and Matt, you can help confirm or deny. I think going into year end, mills had their inventories in really good shape. They shipped everything that they could in the fourth quarter. We had 2 weeks of holidays. I looked at mill inventories and mill inventories are not excessively high at this point in time. And I contrast that with, what I feel is I don't feel that end user inventories are very high. The strongest holder of inventory is the mill. So I feel as though mills have an opportunity to, have more strength in the market than the market's giving them credit. Thoughts?
What part of that do you want me to affirm or deny?
None of it. Greg's a big boy. Let him stand on his own 2 feet.
You know what? Pick and choose. You say, Greg, you're right about this. You're wrong about this. No, Shayna, you ignorant. No.
Yeah, that's funny.
Jane.
I agree with what you said about the mills having their inventories in check going into year end. Now, I don't think that's as true going into January end, right? Because they've been losing order file throughout the month. And the 2 weeks of the Christmas and New Year holiday, the way it broke this year, it kind of screwed up the flow of material,
For sure.
both from a trucking perspective and a rail perspective, and just the flow of order perspective. A lot of people took those 2 weeks off in our business. Then you couple that with a kind of a paralyzed buying group out there in the world, either weather related or they don't want to spend the money and carry the dollars on the high interest rates of borrowing money. We've been talking about that for 2 years. And then, then the kind of the gamesmanship or whatever you want to call it from some mills with tariff talk and all that stuff. So a lot of confusion. I like confusion. Now, if this was July, I would be really, really bearish. But it's not. It's January. And so I'm bullish for the next 5-6 months. And this is just going to be one little episode in a whole in a whole year's worth of activity. But another guy that I'm friends with in the business, he does more of the forward selling type stuff. And I asked him his opinion of the market for this year, and he says roller coaster, up and down, up and down, up and down. He doesn't really think it's going to be all that different from last year with similar lows and similar highs. And I mean, I pretty much agree with that, right? And I feel like we're sort of stuck in the middle right now. And you know, we're gonna go test some lower levels to get some commerce started, and then away we go. Also remember, Greg, the home center effect is going to come into play here in the next 4 to 5 weeks. So a lot of short high-end lumber, a lot of short studs, a lot of premium lumber is going to just fall away from the market naturally, and that does help tighten things up. So,
Hey Sig, we got offered. You have a really good finger on the pulse of the European wood a lot. One reason is from you're originally from Europe, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
And Greg and I got offered some 2x6 no grade stamp the other day, and from Europe. Haven't seen that forever because it's not going to China right now. What stuff are you seeing over in Europe? What are you getting? What's the feedback? I'm always like interested in what you're seeing over in that area.
Yeah, the demand side is absolutely plummeted. You know, their housing starts are down 35 to 50%. They went all wood housing starts about 5-6 years ago, all prefab homes, and their prefabs are nice. I mean, they're not like our prefabs, nothing against ours. So, you know, that whole industry, just the demand just fell out of bed. China is not taking wood from Europe hardly, and Middle East is not doing well on that side either. So really, you know, all the European mills have right now to have any kind of a scratch of a profit is the United States. There's no other markets for them that A, they can do any volume, and B, make any money at.
More or less coming in 2025 than 2024.
I think you'll see more in 2025. Yeah. But their fiber is a little bit tight too, and their fiber is higher cost, which is a profitability issue. So, you know, it doesn't mean they're going to come for 2.7 billion feet and then increase it to 4 billion feet. No, I don't think that. But I think you can count on 5 or 10% higher than 2.7 billion. Wouldn't surprise me. And I know lately Sweden and Norway are really starting to open up to the United States because they can't go anywhere else. And they got the highest fiber cost.
Craig, what are you seeing on the European guys you're talking to? You've got a pretty good mix of them. You're talking to them on a day in, day out basis.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a little more being offered to us. Where we are right now, I would agree with Sig that we would probably see a little bit more over the course of time, but you know, so much depends on, you know, what the price is. If, you know, when we're looking right now of like, you know, $600 lumber, yeah, we're going to continue to see more. That drops down, you know, to like $500 lumber, and that's going to give people pause again. You know, that's kind of what I see. And that's that you know, the challenge that I look in, you know, Matt, you brought it up, is, you know, futures has dropped, you know, $25 here, you know, so far this week. You know, we're approaching the most recent lows in the March contract of the low 570s, which, you know, is 460 Western spruce mill. What do you see as the downside target? Where do you think that can get to? You know, like the conversation you had before. You know, last year
in this current run that we're in,
last year we went sub 400 FOB mill, right?
You're talking in this particular run that we're in right now, or for the whole year?
Right now.
I think 540, 550 is sort of the target. Just my personal opinion. And that was sort of where we were going to expire at that level until a couple of late bids came in, right, like 3 seconds before the close last week. And I think that's where cash is, honestly. I mean, look, dude, we're selling some cash and it's going in that 550, 540 range. So really there wasn't a $40, $50 disconnect between the March contract and today's cash price. And you can make the argument that today's cash price is soft. So I do think that futures will seek that level out, that 540, 550 level out fairly quickly. You know, but I don't see that as a bad thing. I think, you need movement. And look, if you're a trader, you want movement. You don't want a flat market. You don't want a market where we trade within a $10 range for the next 6 months in a row. You need some up and down. You just have to be good at navigating it and, using your hedging strategies and being a smart buyer.
I think, Matt, also the volatility this year you mentioned earlier, I think will also come from, you're going to see some industry shutdowns. Can4 is hurting, IFA is hurting. Nobody has any excess cash on hand. People having to sell more at kind of firewood prices. Call them a fire.
You mean IFG? Did you say IFP or IFG? I couldn't hear you. Sorry.
Well, that's what I'm saying is, you're going to get a lot of volatility because you're going to get shutdown announcements. If you have no duty issue, then you're at 475 break even based on a lot of the analysts are telling me that 475 FOB mill, Western SPF is the break even, cash only, not counting any debt payments. The other side would be 595 if we do get a 25% tariff. Okay. So again, the volatility will come, I think, from closures from the supply side being reduced instead of demand side going up.
Hey, Sig, just so everybody remembers too, we've already, what do we have on top for a duty right now on top of the lumber? And then we have more.
Counting everything in. Sorry. That was counting. Today we're 475. Right?
Yeah, 475. But then we got more coming at the end of the year, middle or third quarter.
I thought it was August.
How did they switched it around, right? They postponed it a little bit, pushed it forward, I thought. Is that correct? Or
what the next
tranche, the next
I don't know. I haven't seen anything. It was originally, the next review period. It's somewhere August, September.
And it's still mixed out there, Greg. You know how we heard up in Vancouver that some of that money had already been distributed? A lot of people don't believe that actually happened. Like nobody knows where the money's at that's been collected so far.
Yeah. So what, the way it works is, when they go through and they do the final.
Sorry. I just, in the real world, we got to count it. I don't know. Here with us plebes, we got to keep track of the dollars.
I agree. But
actually, the process is that they go through review periods, and once they do the final review, which ends up being I think 3 or 4 years in arrears, then they either ask the mills for more money or they give some money back based on what the final.
That's correct.
Versus what the original was. And then once that happens, those files are liquidated and the majority of that money goes to the treasury. Boom, it's gone. And, that's happening every year, rolling year. So there's basically we've been in this for what, 5, 6, 7 years now. So, they've already liquidated 3 or 4 years worth of that. That's gone. So the only thing that's really in flux is those other 3 years. And from what I can see, that's not changing. There's nothing changing there.
There is no the fiber cost in BC is really climbing too. So in other words, we're not going to look at lower cost break-even areas at all this 2025 because your fiber costs have just, continue to rise, and there's a real lack of fiber in Canada, as you saw several mills closed in 24 due to fiber issues, not because they wanted to close a mill.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Hey, Sig, can I just ask a question on that? And maybe this is part of me when we were up at Vancouver listening to some of the speakers a few months back. Yes, there's some lack of fiber. There's lack of fiber. Really, some of these mills were built to accommodate a lot of the beetle kill over the last few decades, but there's still fiber there, and there's still fiber around mills. The problem is, it seemed to me when Charles, when somebody goes, it takes them 3 years to get to a allowable cut because 75 different Indian nations pop up that all have claim to them when maybe there was only 2 or 3 actual Indian nations in the area at the time, and everybody up in that
actually could, I know it's a new era here in the U.S.
It's okay to talk about this. It's okay.
First Nation.
It's okay to talk about this now. It's okay to talk about this now. I got cover. So
What's your question?
So my
you know
question
what,
is, my
Ash,
question
we're all
is,
here. We're just working for equality.
my
of
question is,
outcome.
if they
We're just
decided,
working for equality of outcome, Ashley.
if all of a sudden a government, and I know I've been told by people it'll never happen in BC, decided to not build a great big national park and actually utilize their human capital, their labor, their factories that they have, their tolling facilities for turning fiber into money, could they still have enough fiber to run the current facilities they have a lot harder and have fiber that lasts? Or are they trying to?
It's all part of the system, right? Whether you have environmental pressures or lack of loggers, or it's all part of what goes on, right? So you can't knock it, you can't argue it. I'll tell you one simple argument that'll tell you exactly what's going on. In 2004, British Columbia made 15 billion board feet of lumber. Today, British Columbia is making 6.7 billion board feet.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a reduction of whatever 8-some billion board feet because of the fiber, not because mills didn't want to run and close. So whether it's a First Nation issue, environmental issue, it's just what it is. And a little bit from the government side, the spotted owl doubled the balance sheet of Weyerhaeuser.
Mm-hmm.
So there is tools in place to make things go up more, which creates more taxes, but that's okay. Makes the country go around. So, you got to keep in mind that this is all part of the whole pie. You can't just take one slice out and say, "Oh, that's a great cheesecake." You got to take 3 or 4 slices to figure out.
Well, I think what Ash is getting at is if you eat even the PNW, and Matt, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, if you look at how stumpage is managed, right, in the majority of the rest of North America, and I can speak very, very intelligently in the Southeast and how it's run. But what I think Ash is getting at is there's a lot of hands in the pot between start to finish, from acknowledgement of a fiber stand to that fiber actually being utilized, which in turn, if you're taking, more than 6 to 8 to 12 weeks, or call it 12 months to get something done, that puts a mill in a pickle and a predicament on a couple different fronts. If you're talking about mills fronting payment on estimated stumpage volumes, if you're talking about, okay, well, this is taking, project A is taking longer than track C, so we got to move and we got to allocate, and then it's further away, so now we're going to have to allocate log cars to it, etc. So it puts them in a financial pickle that I think is really the concern, because when we were in Vancouver, one of the things that we kept hearing was just the length of absolute time from start to finish of acknowledgement of access to fiber to that fiber actually being on a log deck averaged 3.5 years. Yeah. And I think that's the problem. And there's a lot of things that go into that, right? First Nations politics, spotted owls, caribou, whatever, right? But I think that is, as a broad stroke, that's what Ash, I think,
equality
is
equality of outcome instead of equality of opportunity.
I kind of look at the whole BC thing from 2 different perspectives. One, when we bought Babine from Fraser back in 2005, 2006 timeframe, I think it was. Maybe it was 2000. Yeah, I think it was 2006. We were starting to get into the beetle problem, right? That was becoming a thing. That was becoming a big story. And I remember talking to the CEO of Hampton at that moment, Steve Zika, who's since retired. We're flying up to Babine, and all I saw was a sea of red trees, just miles and miles and miles of red trees. Like, you can't imagine how many trees were in the process of dying from beetle kill for 400 miles in a row, right? Of just tundra, they call that the taiga. And so from that perspective, I said, Steve, what's going to happen in 10 or 12 years when all this stuff is not usable anymore? And people started talking about super cycles and whatnot. Well, we didn't really get a super cycle ever, but we did get, $1,700 lumber in 21 and 22 because of a COVID virus and
because of
supply shortages, right?
Yeah.
Because of
but the point is, look, there's a natural resources problem that takes 100 years to fix, right? That those trees don't grow like they do in Oregon. We can get a mature Doug fir tree in 35, 40 years here. that saw log, a good saw log.
So
they can't
Dinger, you're
fix
exactly
that
right.
problem overnight. And so I knew back in 2006 that somewhere down the road BC was going to have issues. Well, so did West Fraser. They started buying Alberta assets. So did Canfor. And think about it from their perspective. They knew that BC was going to be a problem.
Yeah, true.
They started buying Yellow Pine assets here. Now they're becoming like heavily invested in American companies, right? And so, in fact, you could make the argument they're quasi-American companies already because they're making most of their profits in America, But the other perspective that I see is the political perspective. And Sig and I have lived here our whole lives. There's ideological capture of the environmental movement in California, Oregon, and Washington occurred 30 years ago. It's completed, right? BC was the last holdout. They were go. We're gonna turn that natural resource into money, and they have flipped to a different political ideology that doesn't believe in that anymore. And I doubt it will ever go back. I really do. I mean, I would love it if the whole West Coast would like come to their senses. And I see California burning because they don't do brush clearing or simple, like creating fire breaks like a mountain town would do in the summertime, right? Like, the fires are going to come. You should probably prepare for it.
It's a macro movement. I see the whole West Coast is. I told Dolman Lumber back in the Dolman sawmills era, not the Dolman distribution. I told them the coast is toast. You cannot operate. Louisiana Pacific had 27 sawmills in Northern California in the 80s. Today, 0, right?
Yeah.
Red Emerson from Sierra Pacific cannot expand in California, had to move to Washington and build 3 mills in Washington because he could not use his own fiber in California.
Yeah.
So this is what Matt is talking about, right? Those are the macro syndromes going on, and you and I, we can't stop it because it's done by some serious funding of some very wealthy people that want it that way.
What was that, Greg?
I'm just saying, all this being said, look at lumber prices, right? I mean, like there's plenty of lumber. There's no shortage of lumber. All the lumber you need. You know what?
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
It's just it's just switched from being produced in BC to being produced in South Carolina and Georgia and Arkansas,
Right.
Well, and that was, Matt, I'm actually happy you brought that up because I was waiting for an opportunity to bring this up. One thing that we're seeing a lot of your big boys switch from number 3 spruce to number 2 southern yellow pine and for specifically for plate.
Are you?
That, yes.
Like the pro dealer yard?
Yes,
and what's
sir.
the application for the number 3?
It's a plate or a truss application instead of a number 3 spruce. And the cost savings is astronomical. I mean, it's insane. I think that's the question I pose to you alternative species gurus, right? Is at what point does species not matter in its low cost denominator, right? Because Matt, you and I have had conversations about very specific markets, right? Always using a very specific species because it's always been done this way, or architectural codes or building codes. But at what point do we reach and doesn't matter? Doug fir, spruce, southern yellow pine, him for whatever's the cheapest option that I can get delivered to my job. And I think that's going to create an absolute free market because everybody's going to have to change their buying patterns.
Yeah.
And
it'll take some time still. People are loyal to species but it does, I don't know. Dude, it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, it took 20 years for the Northeast to stop buying 1/2-inch 5-ply for plywood. Literally they were buying OSB.
Oh yeah. No, I agree.
So it doesn't happen overnight.
You see it on the multifamily, like, clearly. I mean, multifamily jobs, anybody who's anybody has switched from spruce to pine. I mean, whether whether it's studs, finger joint, solid, certainly on the plate. I mean, the number of spruce inquiries now that I get, almost all of them say, well, want to look at southern yellow pine as an option.
It'll take, so Charles, part of me, because I trade more spruce, European, and other stuff, wants to say never or a long time. But I mean, we're there.
Well, I mean, you look at what we've been able to do just in the South as far as rebranding.
It's gonna take one big home builder or one big pro dealer, but probably have to be a pull. It'll take one big home builder to say, I'm okay with optionality. I'm going to do my 30, 90, 120 day pricing off of any stick that falls into this grading category that can meet this. I don't care. Just give me a price. And I'm going to tell my,
well, but that's what I'm saying though. I mean, there's guys that are looking at that from a number 3 perspective, and if they're subbing number 2, subbing the
Sure.
pine for number 3 spruce, and then they realize and they go to a builder and somebody actually opens their eyes and they say, okay, instead of a 2 before 16 delivered Atlanta, whatever price y'all want, right? I can sell you the same price as I sell you your number 3.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, just psychologically, that changes the thought process.
I mean, it's not that much of a
180
price
degrees.
difference between number 3 spruce and number 2 pine right now. I mean, there's a big.
Well, that's my point.
There's not that
That's
much of a price difference. So, it's not going to be like price. It's going to be, hey, let's forward think, or like the guy that says, I'll use number 3 pine instead of number 3 spruce. Then you got a price difference. You have an availability.
Well, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. Because, I mean, in Atlanta about a week ago, you were buying 2 before 16s for what, $460? What was 2 before 16 spruce delivered Atlanta?
500.
Spruce would have been like
500.
more like closer to 600, high 500s. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it creates a window of opportunity, and all somebody has to do is
number
get a
2 to
little
number
bit of
2, but I'm
breeze and
saying going
somebody
number
show.
3 to number 2 pine.
Well, all right. That's what I'm asking. Oh, Greg. I mean, what is 2 before 16 number 3 spruce delivered in Atlanta right now?
Today,
that's Matt's market. He lives
high
and breathes
$400, $500.
Yeah, I mean, I don't sell Atlanta that much, but I know what it's worth. And
$500.
so just roughly
Okay,
$500.
so-
Yeah, high 400s.
So I can deliver 2 before 16 number 2 for, call it 30 to 35, maybe 40
which
bucks
isn't a
less
big
than that.
enough savings to switch if you don't want to deal with lumber that twists and shakes and is.
But we
takes
have
a lot
I
longer.
But you got to think about the buyer psychology,
When the
though,
market-
guys. I mean, I'm outnumbered here, but I love.
Dude, I know it's
going
going to happen over time because consistently over the last 2 years, the yellow pine price has been cheaper. You're making a good argument here. Like, I'm not disagreeing with you.
we talked about this last week with the basis. Yeah.
But the more people that switch, the more demand
Price
there's
goes
going
up.
to be for a fall down product, right? The number 3 yellow pine will just get swallowed up by a few people because mills aren't making number 3 on purpose. It's 8% of their production.
Well, I mean, they're
tops.
not. I mean, in the South, we're not. I mean, we're making a fraction of it
Right.
compared to what we used to.
And so,
do
either you
optimization.
start building more mills pumping out a lot of 2 before.
I don't think we need to build any more mills. I mean, we cut 550 million board foot in the state of South Carolina, and I mean, you just in one state.
You just increased
not-
8
I
mean,
billion.
that sounds like
$8
Walla
billion.
Mina.
You're making 8 billion board feet in the last 5 years more.
Yeah,
I know. That's what I'm saying. We don't need to build anymore.
Yeah.
If the price gets too high, mills will check it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what they do. The mills will check it. So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting.
I'm curious from Greg's perspective because I haven't heard much from Greg here for a little bit. He's zoning off over there in the
He's got a
Pacific
nice.
office.
Is that a gaming chair he's sitting in too?
Yeah.
By the way,
I like getting Greg riled up.
Yeah. And
So-
I'm really digging it.
Now that we got you a chair, we just need to get you a
A
microphone.
millennial chair, 6 says.
comfort. Comfort's important, and I'm just I'm gamer. I'm a gamer.
So use
what was it-
use your crystal ball real quick, Greg, and let's talk about the next couple months with the shock and awe campaign that's coming out of Washington D.C. Where do you think this leads us?
I'm very highly confident that I have NF idea. I think. I mean,
Fair.
when
That's
you
fair.
have so many things going on and such dramatic changes, there's just like the unknown unknowns to me are the hard thing. I mean, I have hope in the one hand that, hey, a lot of this stuff, I mean, I think from a policy standpoint, these are really good policies, but not all things, sometimes the things that are best for you, it's short-term pain for long-term gain. And, then my question is like, is the administration willing to endure that pain for the gain, or will there be enough pushback on stuff? I just think, right now we're throwing so much stuff on the wall and seeing what sticks. All that having been said, I had a discussion with my good friend Brian Westbury, and I am confident that housing is one of the areas that is going to weather all of this the best, for the reason being we're so underbuilt and there's a substantive need that we're forecasting is going to be steady to marginally higher for this year. I don't see any huge collapse. So it's ultimately going to be, to Sig's point, it's going to be supply constraints that cause the price volatility. And until we get to there, and until there's some clarity on the tariff, I think we tread water here. And, Matt, to your point, if you have mills that want to do that deeply discount something, it's probably okay to buy because it's not. And to Charles's point, that's probably just fine. And we may get some bounces on that. Well, one thing we do know is, and the only caveat I have right this minute for spruce, winter weather is with us. And it's starting. I've heard the inklings of it starting to have an impact on Eastern Canadian shipments, and so maybe that causes a bottleneck in the system over the next few weeks that forces people to change their buying habits and need to buy some more. I don't know. Did I answer your question, Matt?
It's all up in the air, needless to say.
I'm optimistic going forward. I think we are entering a new golden era.
Gilded.
And
gilded.
I mean, Trump converted the village people to come over to his side, right? So
Right.
I think people are excited on both sides right now. I think technology and advances are going to, you can sit for 50 years and things are slow. I think in the next 10 years with AI and everything, I think we're going to see some really big advances in the next 2 years. And I'm optimistic on housing and affordability going forward, probably more so with their income levels rising. I just think that there's been a sea change in the last few weeks on both sides of the aisle, and I think everybody's wants to move forward and do some good things. That's saying a lot without saying a lot.
Yeah, your last session, the guest talked about population growth, and I just want to point out one thing, that we had the largest population growth since 2001 in the last 3 years, not combined. Each year was bigger than all the way back to 2001. We had 1.7 increase in 22. We had 2.3 million in 23, and we had 2.8 million increase in 2024. Now, of course, it's going to reflect towards more commercial than residential.
I thought we were deporting most of those people.
We're going to have population deflation, Greg.
Oops. Did I say that out loud?
So anyway, I just want to point out that, the population is still growing, and they're going to Florida, California, Texas. That's where most of them end up percentage-wise.
In Chicago.
And Chicago.
No.
Right. So, yeah, just to point that out.
They come there for the weather.
Everybody's thinking
they're not Russian, Greg.
Anymore. Yeah.
That's good input there, Sig.
So,
Thank you.
all right, let's just talk about a few things. What white items does everybody like? What do they want to get rid of? What do they got? Matt, Greg, and I have used this as an opportunity to talk about some stuff we wanted to move. If you've got anything, say it. Charles, you say it. Maybe the boys at Eagle will be listening again, want to buy some more stuff from us. What do you think going forward? We'll just go around. Whoever wants to start first.
Well, yeah, no, it's now this is a new sales conduit for us. I'm going to be, shamelessly promoting.
Of course, Greg went first.
Well, I usually, you complain when I go last, and now you complain when I go first. Come on.
Hey, I just piggyback, Greg. I just piggyback off of your energy, man.
So we just unloaded a vessel of premium European lumber in Port Arthur, Texas. We got a lot of 10-foot trims down there, 2x4, 2x6. Very competitively priced. We're currently very backed up on our trucking out of our northern distribution. So, there's really nothing we need to focus on there other than getting a few more trucks, although they are getting better this week. But we're unloading a vessel in Port Canaveral, Florida with lot of 2x4 and 2x6 16s, which we're gonna have to find the market on. And so anybody that's interested, 1-800 lumber. Let's go.
Does Ash pick up the phone when you call?
I'm wondering what 1-800 lumber is. I wonder what that goes to.
So am I. I'm just...
I have to say this. When I was a rookie, a guy came over and said, "Here, call Ronnie. And this is white lumber, right?" And he says, "Call Ron and ask for Ronnie." So I'm a rookie. I'm a Cub dialer, right? I'm dialing like mad. And it was actually the phone number for the White House, and I asked for Ronnie.
Oh yeah,
This was Ronald Reagan at the time.
that's awesome.
Nancy took your call.
That's funny.
That's great.
I'd
Matt,
say
how about you?
stuff that I always want to sell. I always want to sell 2x4, number 3, 8s, and 10s because they're slow movers. But there's something I want to sell, and I think I don't really have any other types of issues. I kind of come into the year with a normal kind of attitude towards business and inventory, and then when we came out of the holidays with the mills, kind of talking about the tariffs and whatnot, I haven't really been speculating much other than just listening and waiting to see what happens. So here we are. We'll see. If I was a speculator, which I am, but I would take a look at premium lumber. I think that this is the time of year, the shoulder season, where fancy lumber starts to get disappeared. And so that whether that's studs or dimension, if it's something that you're normally buying in the springtime, it's never too early to start paying attention to what mills have on offer there.
Charles,
I'm nimble. I'm on both sides of the aisle. That's it.
if I call Charles today and I said, "Hey man, what are you selling that I should be that I need today? What do you
want to buy?" I mean, that's the question. I mean, I think that's 1-800 lumber. So is it? I mean, is that how it works? If you wanted to buy something, I will sell it to you. I think everything is very negotiable right now. I think Greg hit the nail on the head. There's a lot of lumber in a lot of different places, but I also think there's a lot of disconnect per mat, right? Which creates opportunity. And it's a timing and price thing. Are you looking at tomorrow? Are you looking at next week? Are you looking at 3 months from now? Because there's a lot of unknowns. I mean, we're in the market every day. I mean, the big thing for us is just go with the flow. Too many unknowns to kind of plant a flag and fly it. Personal opinion.
Yeah, I think my push.
Unless you wanted to get short OSB at 380.
OSB, what's it doing? What's OSB doing? Something I don't keep an eye on very much.
Yeah, we're sub $300. But the low trade over the past 18 months was like 260 or 265. And there's some numbers that are pretty close to that are surfacing, I should say, throughout the market. So I don't think we'll stay here long. So if you need it, buy it.
A little bit coming to the end, we had this bull market forever and high prices, but you got production coming on this year. You got more Euros coming in, and 2026, you've got a ton of production coming. So, I wouldn't be too excited about OSB long term. Short term, it's a different story.
Is there any coming over from Europe right now? The OSB?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, boys. Well, I appreciate the time today. We do have our buddy Chris Beard from John Burns is going to join us in a couple of weeks again, and we're working on a few more guests. And Sig, this is number 2 for you. We'd like to get you in the books for a couple months out again, if that's cool.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I really enjoy it and love digging some stuff out for you guys to bring to the show so get people some good information.
All right. Real good guys. Thank you so much.
Talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of The Lumber Word. The Lumber Word podcast is dedicated to engaging conversations about the lumber industry, including trading ideas, market trends, and evaluations of overvalued and undervalued assets. We wish to emphasize that the discussions and opinions expressed in this podcast are purely for informational and entertainment purposes. They should not be considered as financial or investment advice. We encourage our listeners to make their own financial decisions, taking into account their unique circumstances and financial goals, and to seek professional financial advice if necessary.